Hello, hello, and welcome. 1988. We keep moving farther and farther back
The
in
halcyon
time.
1980s, right? Not that I remember a whole lot, because, in the 80s, I was in my, tens.
Yeah, I remember cartoons. That's really all I remember is television from 1980s for the most part.
Yeah.
Some major news stories, though. U.S. and Canada agree on a trade agreement. So NAFTA for the first time.
Woo!
Woo. I mean,
I don't really have a lot of commentary about trade agreements here on this here podcast. That is not why you hired me.
I don't know. It's nice to get along with our neighbors. I mean, I kind of like that. So,
Yeah.
Pan Am 747 explodes from terrorist bomb and crashes in Lockerbie, Scotland, killing all 259 aboard and 11 on the ground.
I have a vague memory of this,
Yeah. I mean, that's where all of my knowledge of terrorists taking over planes, I think, starts with this. In that whole the panic about it happening.
Yeah.
We had Dukakis versus Bush, 1988 presidential election.
What is there a less worthy candidate than Michael Dukakis was? Obviously I could not vote in that election, but I don't know. And I mean, I know we don't get political on this podcast, but I am also not looking forward to voting for Biden in 2024. I just got to put that out there.
No comment. I will say that this is probably, for me, this is my first presidential election, the one that I was actually aware of things going on.
Well, because Dan Quayle was a soundbite wrapped in an idiot, basically,
But it was I think it was the first time even though I wasn't an adult, I was old enough to understand that we were electing leaders now, and we were talking about it in school and stuff.
Yes.
This is my first one. The Washington Redskins destroy the Denver Broncos 42-10 in the Super Bowl this year.
Can you tell where this went? I remember this game, and I remember we had a party, which is very weird because my mom hates parties, but we had a Super Bowl party at our house, and I remember taking a VHS tape and thinking, oh, I should record this game, and popping it in right before the game, and the game was amazing, 42-10. That's a crazy, crazy score for the Super Bowl. And yeah, I remember being everybody was freaking out. I'm sure my dad was punching holes in walls. He has done that during Washington football games before. So yes, that is definitely a core sports memory for me.
And for all the kids listening, she would have been recording that on VHS.
Yes.
Too,
oh, yes. It was a full-on VHS tape. I remember holding it. I remember writing on the label afterwards, Super Bowl 42-10 exclamation point or something like that.
Do not touch. Do not re-record over.
Yeah, no, of course. Oh, God, no.
Top of the Pops, because I gotta have faith, the faith. Ooh, gotta have faith, the faith. George Michaels.
That was my first concert.
You got to see George Michaels in concert.
Yeah, this album, my mom won tickets on the radio, and it was a choice between, I don't know, Tears for Fears and George Michael and something else. And she was like, who do you want to go see? And I remember he had automated garter belts grinding, and my mom was really embarrassed for me, and because I asked her, I was like, oh, what's those? And she's like, oh, never mind. It was 11, I think it was 10 or 11, but that was a pretty awesome concert, not gonna lie.
Oh, wow. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I bet that was fun. Biggest movie of the year, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Have I seen this since it was in the movie theater? I don't know if I have.
Probably not. My introduction to Bob Hoskins. In this movie.
Mine too. I mean, and I'm sorry to Bob that this is what I know him for, because I know he's a classically trained actor. But
Best Picture Oscar goes to Rain Man,
a movie I still have never seen, and I'm okay with that.
And that is 1988. Come and join us.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rewind Project. I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
And we have a very special guest, Staten Island's favorite daughter, our literary correspondent and friend of the pod, Kristen Murray is here.
Woo! Good morning. How are you?
We had to get somebody authentic to be on the Working Girl podcast.
Happy to be here representing.
I love it so much, and I love this movie. And spoiler alert, I love this movie. It's going to be a real tongue bath for me for this movie. But we have a lot of things to talk about the meat of this movie. I'm pretty sure that Matt did not have the same experience that Kristen and I did on this movie, so that will be fun. Matt, was this your first time?
This was my first time watching Working Girl.
Okay.
The title meant something else to me, so I was kind of surprised. No, I was just,
I mean, it is pretty clever. It's pretty clever.
Yeah, I had specific problems with this movie. Overall, the movie was fine. There was certain casting that probably I disagree with, but we can talk about that when we get to casting.
I mean, we're going to get real deep. We're going to get real deep into it. All right, so Working Girl, our 1988 movie. So I did a poll on my Instagram because 1988 is chock full of amazing movies, like big. It was really a Sophie's choice for me between this and Beetlejuice, which I also can probably script in my head. The OG Hairspray, the only one I recognize, the John Waters version, is also 1988. Big. So this was like a crazy year for movies. So I'm thrilled though that we are talking about Working Girl, even though it got the lowest number in my poll.
Probably this of those choices, all great movies. This is probably the one where applying a 2023 lens is the most interesting, big requires a suspension of disbelief.
And it requires it in 1988 and also in 2023.
Right, exactly. Like, is the Zoltar machine more, are we any closer to that than we were in 1988?
I actually saw a Zoltar. They had a Zoltar in Brighton, England when I was there a few months ago. And I obviously spent the pound or whatever it was to get my fortune read. And it was super creepy. It was creepy AF, as they say.
Did you get to spend a week as a child again?
No, I did not. And honestly, I'm okay. Like, my 13-year-old self, I'm not making out with Elizabeth What's-Her-Face Perkins. None of that's happening when I'm 13. Yeah. I was wearing suede vests and puffy shirts and as part of the young adult library advisory committee. There was no crafting toys.
I mean, that has a whole Prince vibe going on to it though, too.
I told somebody that I was really proud of this black suede vest that I owned recently, and she demanded photos, and I will try to find them. If I find them, I will send them to you guys.
Please do.
Yeah. I just remember being like, I am so fancy right now. Some things haven't changed. But anywho, let's get back to Working Girl. We don't need to talk about the trials and tribulations of Allie's puberty. This movie was written by Kevin Wade, a person don't think I'd ever heard before. Kevin Wade. But directed by Mr. Diane Sawyer, Mike Nichols. Did you know that he was married to Diane Sawyer?
I did know he was Mr. Diane Sawyer, but he's also a director where I feel like only much later did I start to see all the things that he directed. His body of work was not obvious to me. I'm sure that I would appreciate him more if I did a deeper dive.
Well, I just pulled up his Wikipedia page, and let me tell you, his oeuvre is crazy. He directed The Graduate. He directed Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. He directed The Birdcage, and he also directed Closer, which was not a great movie.
I just never think of him when we watched The Birdcage, and I think I felt like I did the same thing during The Birdcage.
I actually kind of forgot he directed The Birdcage, which, still holds up, by the way.
Postcards from the Edge. Wow.
I know. Eric's going to be mad. That's his favorite movie. He's going to be mad that you didn't remember that.
Sorry,
Eric. So I was surprised when I was looking up the notable achievements for this movie. There are a lot. I didn't know it had 6 Oscar nominations.
I am shocked that it had 6 Oscar nominations.
Well,
I was not shocked, but as your Staten Island correspondent, of course I was not shocked.
Right.
Yes.
Staten Island goodness all over the place. It was nominated, so it had 1 win. It was nominated for Best Picture, Mike Nichols for Best Director, Melanie Griffith for Best Actress, Sigourney Weaver for Best Supporting Actress, Joan Cusack for Best Supporting Actress, who I think should have won.
Yeah.
And then obviously Let the River Run was a winner for Best Song, which I'm not going to lie, it swelled, at the beginning of the movie. I got a little misty-eyed just because.
Iconic opening, sweeping in on the ferry. That song just rolls in. And the variations of the song throughout the movie, also iconic. a little oboe version when she's feeling sad. Iconic.
I didn't remember that, and I was like, man, Carly Simon really got her coin this movie, because she basically wrote one melody, and it was kind of transposed throughout the entire movie. So
your Staten Island correspondent will report that this song was in heavy rotation in your middle school choral performances in New York at the time, because I was in middle school the year this movie came out, and that song was at graduations. Like, could not go long without hearing Let the River Run in late 80s New York. That is the truth.
We performed it in the Gay Men's Chorus in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. So.
I'm a singer. I would love to sing that song, like in a choral environment. I actually have, every time I ride the ferry, which isn't very often, but I do the last time I was on it, I made a stranger take several shots of me pretending to be Melanie Griffith whilst on the Staten Island ferry.
You wouldn't be the only one. The fewer and fewer people, I have to imagine, do that now, but there was a time.
There was a time. But yeah, no, this was, I don't know, 2016, 2017. Yes, I will share those with you all. I look more and more contemplative as I go through. And I couldn't, and then I was like selfieing. I couldn't get the right angle. Anyway, and then I posted it, I think, on Facebook, and it was a lukewarm response to what I thought was a very well crafted photo. Just to let you know my deep dedication to this movie. Okay, moving right along. Also for the 1989 Golden Globes, also 6 nominations, but there were 4 wins this time. Oh, Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. I feel like this is a dramedy, but we get into the whole breakup of the Golden Globes Best Picture thing all the time. They won. Melanie Griffith won for Best Actress. Sigourney Weaver won for Best Supporting Actress. And obviously Let the River Run was a tie with Two Hearts by Phil Collins from a movie called Buster, which I then looked up. He starred in that. It's about the Great Train Robbery in the 60s. And I was like, first of all, Phil Collins, that's a good song. It's not better than Let the River Run. But Phil Collins was in a movie about the Great Train Robbery? Okay. I went on a real deep Buster rabbit hole, and I had to dig myself back out.
Just alone in your butt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, has anybody even ever clicked on this Wikipedia article before? It was real dusty when I got in there. Mike Nichols and Kevin Wade were also nominated for Best Director and Best Screenplay, respectively, for the Golden Globes. So, I mean, pretty notable achievements. It also has it's a pretty high score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like 80s, I think, 80s or 90s, pretty high. So the plot is, when a secretary's idea is stolen by her boss, she seizes an opportunity to steal it back by pretending she has her boss's job. Dun, dun, dun. I prefer assistant.
There's something missing from that description. I mean, obviously distilling it down to a single line is complicated, but it's it's a good idea. It's it's the assistants, excuse me, like a viable idea. I don't know. It makes it seem there's something missing from this, in my view.
Well, I think it's very stale. I always take the log lines from IMDb, because the log lines from Wikipedia are 5 sentences long. And I'm like, that's not what we're looking for here. Right. But it misses the whole human aspect. There's a lot of relationship. There's a lot of and I'm not just talking about romantic relationship. There's, friendship stuff. There's boss mentor stuff. There's other...
There's sort of upstart, trying to move up in the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This makes it sound like it's just some sort of caper. Right. There's Scooby-Doo music behind it. I'm going to steal my idea back, and I'm going to run it up the ladder.
It's not a viable business idea because she's trying. It's not jump to conclusions, Matt. She's out there, really putting in the financial. Hustling. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, it lacks the hustle. That's what that description lacks, exactly is the hustle.
Yes. Yeah. All right, let's get into this cast. I had the principles, and then I was like, I'm only going to do 2 honorable mentions, and then I got real deep into the honorable mentions. So we have a lot to talk about with this cast. Matt, do you have a preemptive thing to say about this cast before we start?
No.
Okay,
no.
You look like you were about to jump in. I know that you're going to have thoughts with capital T as we go through. So, first up, billed third, but listed first in the cast, and we're going to get into that in the fun facts. Melanie Griffith as Tess McGill.
My biggest problem with the movie is Melanie Griffith.
So I find this interesting. I have had problems with her on other watches. I've seen this movie probably, I don't know how many times. But this time watching it, she didn't bother me.
Okay. I'm not going to watch it again, so I'll just take your word for it. I kind of feel like she's two levels that she has. Like she's got soft and then she's got like medium soft. And like there wasn't really any life that came out of her. She just always kind of seemed sad throughout. And that might be due to some other complications while filming. But there wasn't a whole lot of emotion out of her. And it was a kind of a very vanilla performance for me. I'm very surprised that she was nominated for an Oscar, just because there's nothing about this performance that stood out for me. So, but I could definitely see why they cast her, because she's definitely the underdog kind of casting for this. Like you would always underestimate her, but she never gave me a reason to say, oh yeah, but she's really the reason there. Like maybe 5 minutes in the elevator with one other character at the end. That was about it.
Well, and I think too, and maybe I literally just popped in my head, but like the other two main female performances are so over the top.
True.
That when you're comparing not only Tess McGill, but also Melanie Griffith, who has never really been the most dynamic of actresses, probably her whole career, then it's probably even more in stark contrast.
Yeah. Yeah. The other two lead females in the movie definitely have a lot more personality when on screen. And so for her, as a, just kind of like an average person that has a brilliant idea and like is a good thinker, it's easy to see, her being overshadowed by everybody. And it's a harder push for her throughout life and in this particular type of business. But at the same time, I kind of needed something a little bit more dynamic along the way. And I just didn't feel like I got it from her.
Kristen, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I find it so hard, right? Like I saw this movie for the first time in 1988 and 4,228 times since, right? And I don't know that I've ever. It's interesting. Like in preparing for this, it's probably the first time I really even looked at like who else might have been cast in this role, like seeing like who else went out for it. But I take her performance. Now we can talk later about, what was going on with actual Melanie Griffith at this time and how much that affected this performance. But I took it as kind of like, she was trying to be low key. Like she was kind of undercover, but in plain sight, that like some of the low keyness was this like Eliza Doolittle accent performance that she was doing. And so I never really, I've never questioned it because, again, your Staten Island correspondent, like we were all in on this from the beginning.
From the jump, yeah.
From the jump, right? Like secret pact, like we love this movie, like no matter what happens. But, I really did take it as like, she was pretending and she was like keeping it low key. So
that's an interesting take on it. Yeah. I could see that like she was trying to make sure people were underestimating her. And so she, as a person, she's really just keeping her intelligence on the down low.
Right. And if you think about the number of scenes she was in where she ran into somebody and then had to kind of disappear into the crowd, right? So that like somebody didn't recognize her. Like Joan Cusack is never being subtle enough to then disappear into the crowd, right? Like Melanie Griffith is having a cocktail at the bar and sliding out. But like, Sin was never doing that. So...
Well, and it just really struck me, Kristen, because I'm like, is this a modern retelling of My Fair Lady? Because, is Jack Traynor the Henry Huggins of this movie? And I feel like that's a whole other podcast probably, but I don't know. I'm like...
For the premium version of this.
Yeah, I'm like thinking about this, and there are definitely some shades to that. Though, Jack doesn't obviously teach her like how to speak and how to dress, but he definitely...
She's self-trained. She's
her. One more thing about Melanie Griffith is I will say that she looked great.
She did.
She did. And it's interesting, that now that we're talking about this, one of the things I noted is that Sigourney Weaver is often like in a red dress in a sea of gray suits, and like really trying to stand out. And, so Tess looked great, but Tess was trying to like blend in. And, Catherine looked great, but she was like, I'm the only woman. And she like leaned into it. Like, that's an interesting contrast as well.
Yeah. Sigourney Weaver is definitely like, I'm the HBIC. Like,
Correct.
Get in line. We'll get to her in a second. But moving right along to Jack Traynor, I have long said, and I still stand by this, that this is Harrison Ford's hottest movie. Now, I will say, I will preface that by saying, I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I don't find the Indiana Jones movies good movies.
Oh my God.
I find them boring.
I'm cutting your mic off right now.
Am I fired? Is this the shirt scene alone is worth the price of admission?
The shirt scene is great. As hotness correspondent, do you have other Harrison Ford top contenders? Like, what's in competition with this if it's not Indiana Jones?
I mean, he's kind of hot in Witness. It's not a great movie to talk about hotness.
The hottest of all movies, Witness.
Not the hottest movie to talk about, but he is pretty hot in that movie. I mean, he's probably hot in Air Force One. I have not seen that movie.
Sabrina?
What?
Sabrina?
I definitely did not watch that movie.
Oh yeah, he's pretty hot in Sabrina. That's true. I think of this movie as like it was not like it was finally he was like a person. Like obviously like Indiana Jones and Han Solo are people, but they're in these like highly fictionalized worlds where I was like, oh, he's like a New York cad, a man about town. And I feel like I saw him in a different light in this movie. Witness notwithstanding.
I do love that movie.
Well, this is a character that isn't bigger than life, like Indiana Jones or Han Solo.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I would agree. It was a more subtle performance for him.
And I'm not fighting you on the hotness, Allie. I think, he busts out that Han Solo smile at one point in this movie. And like,
yeah, and I was like, woo, 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 woo.
If you have a signature move, let it be that. Like,
I think this was his I think I read somewhere that this was his first, romantic comedy or this, where he was sort of like a quote unquote normal person. And not somebody gallivanting either across space or across archaeological sites. So, I don't know. I just, he is just always, yeah, you're right. Like he's funny and he's charming and he's a little bit of a cad, but not as caddish as most of the other men in this movie, which is not a high bar. But
he was a saint by most of the other men.
Yeah. Like most of the men in this movie, Oliver Platt. Come on,
all he did was lie about his identity.
No big deal. Moving on to the aforementioned head bitch in charge. Sigourney Weaver is Catherine Parker. I love her in this role. I mean, I love Sigourney Weaver forever and ever. And I love her in this role because maybe outside of Joan Cusack, nobody is having more fun in this movie than Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
I mean, the way she worked, those cutaways to her in like the hospital when she's just got like all that activity flitting around her. There's like fondue.
Did you catch the nurse painting her toenails? I saw that this time. She's just, and it's obviously like not only is she Tess's boss, but obviously she comes from privilege. Her parents live in that crazy ass, Park Avenue townhouse. She went to Wellesley, so I'm sure she's got a million connections from that. So, I really found it interesting that they, if Tess is sort of a caricature of like working class coming up, Sigourney Weaver is a caricature of like blue blood, but both of them didn't seem crazy caricature to me. Like,
yeah, no,
don't all speak at once. I know that was brilliant. I'm sorry that I just blew you away with my brilliance.
No, I definitely think it's relying on us having that kind of idea of people. The movie is, and she plays it really well. I mean, I tend to forget how good of a comedic actress Sigourney Weaver is. I mean, because I always default to the Alien films, and she's like an action star. But then you think about something like Galaxy Quest, and she's fucking hilarious in Galaxy Quest. So her doing this kind of over-the-top socialite role, really, it's just kind of showing like another thing that she can actually do. She's a really great comedic actress. I'm surprised that she's not in some ways as big of an actress as Meryl Streep, because I feel like she has just as much range as Meryl Streep does. Do you know what I mean? Like Meryl gets all the roles, and I kind of feel like Sigourney Weaver has just as much range and ability. I would love to see her more often than we do.
Well, I mean, she is in the Avatar movies, so she's definitely laughing all the way to the bank. So
she is. I mean, she's not want for money. I mean, she's been in a lot of very popular and well-funded movies.
And I mean, we have to talk obviously about her turn in Dave, which I also love that movie.
Also an amazing performance. Yes.
As First Lady. She discovers her husband is not her husband. Anyway, if you've not seen Dave, you need to go out and watch it.
Spoiler alert for Dave, I guess.
Sorry, it was 20-something years ago, but yes. But you find that out at the beginning of the movie. It's not
true. That's true.
not, all right, moving right along to, speaking of Cad About Town, both Alec Baldwin and Mick Dugan, his Staten Island counterpart. I mean, does anybody ooze sleaze in the way that Alec Baldwin does? I mean, honestly.
And then we name him Mick Dugan and put on Staten Island.
Guess what? He's Irish.
What?
And if you didn't know, listen to his toast. It's like, let's name this guy Mick and give him the most Irish of all toasts. Like, I'm not even Irish, and I know that that's an Irish toast.
Like, what if he had used a brogue? It's
right. Did he have a 4-leaf clover tattooed on his body somewhere? Probably.
I mean, we pretty much could have seen if he did. I mean, there was a lot of Alec Baldwin in in the opening.
That's true. That's true. We did see a lot of Alec, especially with Doreen DiMucci.
Oh, Doreen. Sweet Doreen.
But he's actually, Alec Baldwin is in this less, like, if you had asked me last week, like, I would have thought he was like, he's definitely there as like a, like a reminder and a representative of like sort of Tessa's like, home base and like what she's trying to break away from. Like, I think that I remembered that being more about Alec Baldwin being in the movie more than he actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's in it just enough.
Yeah. Well, I'm not asking for more. Alec Baldwin does just kind of like dance. He's like, he gives a toast. He makes a proposal. He makes a speech. Like, he's like that guy. Like, he's like Mick Duganing it up whenever he appears. He's carrying the
boat's doing really well,
He's got a boat loan.
Yeah, he's got a boat loan.
It's all happening.
He bought Jimmy Noonan's old boat, Now, a question about the boat. This bothered me when I was watching it. So is it like a sailboat? Is it a passenger boat? Like, is he taking people out for like sunset cruises on the Hudson? I was very confused about the boat part.
I definitely believe the boat loan was career related, that Jimmy Noonan's boat was going to be put to professional purposes. But for as much as Staten Island is an island, like
we're dispelling the rumors right now. You heard it here, folks. It is an island,
right? Like, it is water, just like you learned. Like, it's a real island. This makes it seem like you spend a lot more time like on the water in Staten Island than like, a lot of Staten Island is inland. Like, this made it seem like Staten Island was like all shore. Like, they live. There's like a clanging tugboat in the back that they're in Staten Island. But like, maybe it is that he like, takes people out on fishing excursions. Like, you can get to like New Jersey waters very quickly too. Like,
no, I guess that's true. I know.
So, but yes, when he was like, my boat loan. Now, my boat loan is also an amazing thing to say in a Philly accent, which I always have ears for here in Philadelphia. The New York accent doesn't do anything to boat loan the way that a Philly accent would.
Yeah, get Aunt Mary Pat to talk about boat loans. I'm going to commission a cameo for Aunt Mary Pat to talk about boat loans.
Boat loan.
Boat loan. All right, the one, the only, the fabulous, the great Joan Cusack as Cynthia, Tess McGill's best friend.
Another actress I can't get enough of. I love Joan Cusack in so many roles.
I love her so much. I will always think of her in this. So I think probably my first exposure to Joan Cusack. And I just, it's like, she's so good and she's so over the top, but she doesn't make it showy, and she's the best friend. And I just love at the end when Tess is in her own office. The first person she calls is not Jack Trainer. It is Cynthia. Like, that felt very real to me. Like, I would do that. I would call my best friend and be like, can you fucking believe that? Like, I have my own secretary. Like, I don't know. She's just so good.
And then Sin does the best friend thing, which is tell everybody around you, whether they care or not. Yes. Like, some of those people knew Tess, but she was like, she did it. And, that a person like that gets the unconditional support of people around her. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, she's definitely that character actress that doesn't steal the scene, but she just adds to it. And you just always remember her, but she doesn't steal the scene. Like, even in Addams Family Values, is like one of my favorite roles of her. I mean, you've got this whole wacky cast, and she just adds her wackiness to it, and it just all kind of works, and you remember it, but it's just all kind of perfect. And that's, whenever I think of Joan Cusack, that's what I think about. She's just this amazing supporting actress that just brings her wackiness without taking over the scene, which is really hard to do, because when you have wacky characters like that, it's just you just kind of assume that they're just going to control the scene, and it's just them. They're the only flavor that you taste.
I think that's right. And she does a lot, think about the things she does here, right? Like, she's her best friend from home. She works with her. She throws her a party. She has an over-the-top wedding of her own, but she's also there to share in the shock of the cost of Catherine's wardrobe. But then she's also dispensing the advice, are you sure that this isn't going too far? Like, she's there for all the things, literally a best friend, thick and thin, but not stealing the scene, right? She's there to be she's the voice of reason a little bit, right? Yeah. Like, her line about dancing around in her underwear like Madonna, both rings incredibly true to the character. But
also, make me Madonna.
She delivers that, she's so serious. Sometimes I dance around the house in my underwear. Doesn't make me, but you're this is serious.
You're riveted, right? You're riveted.
You're ridiculous and seriousness at the same time.
And I mean, I really paid attention to the hair and makeup this time around. And let me tell you, I don't remember the two-tone purple and blue eyeshadow.
Oh, the eyeshadow is, yes.
I mean, it's all the way up to her eyebrow line, and it's just perfect. I mean, I remember the hair. Who doesn't? I live the hair. Or I tried to. With naturally curly hair, I could never really get it. It just made me look like I had a crazy mullet. I'll send pictures. But I had friends, had the big bangs and the whole situation. And man, that's just A+. I
know my friend Beth Ann and I, who Allie knows very well, we have long threatened to make that our Halloween costume, that we were going to be Tess and Sin.
Yes, this year.
Well, honestly, it mostly has to do with us, on October 29th, finding it difficult to source the suiting that we would need. We just need to think about it sooner.
I mean, what are you doing this weekend? Sitting on the couch. I think this time.
Not true. Now's my time to research. Vintage dress barn looks.
Well, look, you wouldn't do that, and I've always wanted to be Beetlejuice for Halloween, so I want to make that happen. Which also requires the same time of sourcing. I can't decide.
Right. It's a milestone. The 2023 Halloween, we will celebrate the movies of 1988.
I've always wanted to dress as Beetlejuice, and I need somebody to go as my Lydia, and it's going to happen this year.
Matt, you can take Big or Hairspray.
Yes.
I'll go with Zoltan.
Don't.
Zoltar. I'll go with Zoltar.
The Zoltar machine is actually if you got yourself a refrigerator box around it, that would be an amazing idea.
I would die. That is such a good costume. But we digress. So anyway, we'll revisit around Halloween time, and we'll let you all know what happened. Okay, last of our principal characters. He's not really that principal, but he's sort of the head of everything. Philip Bosco as Orrin Trask. I remember him being meaner, and now maybe because I've been in the workplace for 25 years, I'm I've known much meaner people in my life, so he didn't actually seem that mean to me this time around.
No, he's kind of like a benevolent billionaire, right? It's all the people in between them and him are the ones that aren't giving them, he's I'm the family businessman. I just happen to be incredibly rich from doing it.
And once he finds out what's really going on, he starts to question Catherine Parker and realize that she's total bullshit. So at the end of the movie, he's not the villain. He is just the wealthy guy that everybody's trying to get at.
And I mean, I clocked again for the 90th time that he's having lunch with Tess on her first day do we think that he normally has lunch with like that level of person when they come into the, so already he's sort of recognizing the special relationship that he has with Tess, like on her first day of work.
He's going to look out for her. I choose to take it that way. Yes.
Right. No, absolutely. And like, he's going to really be the mentor that she was looking for in Catherine, hopefully.
Yes.
Well, and I think so too, just because her approach to figuring out stuff, like she was going through like magazines that normal people read and putting 2 and 2 together, which is not how I would think most people that are evaluating business decisions are doing. But she's figuring out what actually makes that business work and then how to make the relationship based off of that, which was kind of amazing when you think about how she put 2 and 2 together to actually purchase the radio stations instead. So I thought that was kind of a cool story.
All right, so we're talking about some dis/honorable mentions. We're the only one dishonorable. Dishonorable mention going to Kevin Spacey playing to type as Bob the limousine creep.
I didn't even recognize him. I didn't, like, the character didn't track at all for me.
Oh, he's creepy and gross, and well, he didn't probably have to stretch too far.
His only scene is in the limo with her.
Yeah.
He's not elsewhere, right? Yeah. I mean, I guess as a creep, he crushed it.
Well, I read when I was looking for fun facts that they decided like to cast him, and he learned his, like, they messengered over a script and he basically learned his lines in like an hour and then did that scene. So sure. Moving right along to David Duchovny. Shout out to Kristen for noticing this one as the bathroom surprise party guest.
I mean, he probably was also at the engagement.
He was. When I read about it, he was, yeah.
Like, yeah. But yeah, I guess, he doesn't talk about this role a lot in other but there he was. Yeah.
There he was. Yeah. I love watching these old movies and like either seeing them pop up on screen or like I always stay for the credit list and like scanning the credit list to see who's famous now. Speaking of Ricky Lake as a bridesmaid at the vaguely racist wedding reception, which we're going to get to in a second. Also this year, as we've talked about Hairspray, her breakout movie was the same year. So I assume that she filmed this tiny baby role before she became a major star. But yeah, so I was watching, Kristen and I were on the same page. I was watching this movie and I was texting with Kristen, as I want to do. And I was like, is this wedding vaguely racist? It really started with the doorman and then the Calypso band and the people of color as only the bridesmaids or the bartenders and the.
I don't remember really ever thinking about that before, but there was something about the way everybody at the wedding was also drawing attention to the fact that it was themed, and they were like, "Well, isn't this unique and lovely?" And vaguely racist.
Well, and then of course, you see the bride come in when Melanie Griffith and Harrison Ford are in the bathroom, and she's like, "Do you love it?" Meaning the reception.
She's like, "My husband hates it." I was like, I mean, does your husband have a point?
Did you need the steel drum band? Is what I'm asking.
True.
Matt, did you think that the wedding reception was vaguely racist?
I did not. I thought it was over the top. I think if you remove the theme, you probably would have had, because this is wealthy New York in 1988, I think the staff that was doing all the waiting and stuff probably would have been the staff that was doing the waiting regardless of the theme of the actual party.
Oh, but the pith helmets at the beginning. That's when I was like, oh, I started down that. I was like, oh, don't remember that.
It was cringy. It was cringy.
It was cringy. It was cringy. And it was like, why was it like, so you have this like very wealthy family. Like it's obviously like a very expensive wedding, but it's not typical. Like were we supposed to take something away from that? Like a sign of their, like,
they're cool. It's a cool family.
They are. Like, it's not all finger sandwiches. It's all or was it just like the sight gag of Harrison Ford taking down that like giant tropical cocktail? Like maybe. But yeah, it's not like I was like, oh, the Trasks are real down to earth field drums, Like,
all right, so we're going to wrap this up because we have to talk about this cast for like 800 years. But 2 more honorable mentions. The great Nora Dunn as Catherine's jerk colleague and Olympia Dukakis as personnel director, which was like, was she in there? And then I was like, oh, it's the same year that her cousin ran as president. I was like, is there a connection? But then I was like, I think that's just coincidence.
Nora Dunn stood out to me immediately. I'm like, oh my God. And then, but I didn't pick up on Olivia Dukak.
Matt.
Were you two screening during Tess's transfer?
I think I might have been, honestly.
Matt, I'm so disappointed.
Sorry.
There to warn Tess about her, she's a difficult employee.
Yes. Did you catch when she said, fourth time's the charm at the end?
Yeah, because earlier she said, this is the third time I have to move you.
Don't worry, we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
I know.
I mean, she's from Boston, right? Like, she's from Massachusetts, so maybe it's hard for her. I don't know. So, okay, we're talking about business. Title of this section is Insert Business Words Here. So, as I was watching this, again, for the 900th time, I really felt like this could be slotted into that pantheon of big business people movies in the 80s. We got Wall Street, we got Secret of My Success, we got Risky Business, we got Baby Boom, which, by the way, is a sleeper. If you've not watched Baby Boom, I need you to go out and watch it right now. It's a fucking great movie.
Agree.
Diane Keaton is at the pinnacle. It's just a great movie. This is not a Baby Boom podcast, but I could talk about that for many, many minutes. So, I sort of feel like, the 80s was the business time and Wall Street and all these people getting rich. And, why were there so many business movies in the 1980s? And also, are we still kind of obsessed? I mean, we had Wolf of Wall Street, which obviously harkens back to that era, but that was a good movie and people went and saw it and wanted to relive the boomtown of the 80s, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, it's the promise of America that, you can go from nothing to something. And we kind of love unbridled capitalism until people have too much money. And then we get angry with them for having too much money. I think it's kind of like the 80s was really about this, wasn't it? Like, it was all about big cars, driving Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and like making as much money as possible.
Like smoking a lot of, I guess not smoking, snorting a lot of coke.
Snorting cocaine.
Yeah. The cocaine.
I mean, it is, right? It's like the 80s is like suits and Wall Street and shoulder pads.
And briskly walking down the street.
Right. And this movie actually, you called it a dramedy before, Allie, and it is, it kind of takes that and then gives you like rom-com elements to it also, right? Like the businessy part of it. Sure, I kind of understand the business transaction. It's not like Succession, which I watch every week, and I have no idea what the business component is, except that like there will be winners and losers.
They'll be impeccably dressed.
Right. Like you don't really need to understand it because like it's not the doing of that is the plot, I mean, sort of say Marvel movies are like that too. It's like everybody wants the jewels. Okay, that's the conflict, right? Like you don't really need sure, there's 200 pages of backstory about like how the Trask buyout would actually be occurring, but like whatever, we don't need to understand that. But I thought that this introduced that in a way that was like unique. Because it brought in this kind of like also like the relationships are very important in this movie, I think.
Well, and I will say that thanks to Succession, I did know what a bear hug was when they were talking about it in this movie. So I'm just saying, like, you can't say that Succession is not teaching me something other than how to poorly rap and be a shit human being. Because when they were talking about the radio station or whomever getting a bear hug, I was like, I know what that is. I know what that is. I know how that works. It was very exciting.
But it's also, right, also, I'm thinking about Baby Boom now, Allie. Like, also,
who doesn't?
Who can't stop thinking
about Baby Boom.
Right, it's also like finding a place for women in this in this setting is also, I mean, that's kind of like, Baby Boom is coming at it from a different place. trying to figure out like where women fit into these worlds and how feminism intersects with these worlds. Like it's starting to explore that too.
Well, I mean, that's a great segue into one of the next sections, which is honestly how much has changed in 35 years for women in the workplace, especially in the financial and tech sectors. Not that much. I mean, some, but not as much as you would think. Though I suppose, whenever I watch Mad Men and I see obviously the treatment of women in Mad Men, it's my favorite show of all time. I'm like, ooh, the 60s weren't that long ago either. So it's like infinitesimal growth in the last, 60 years.
So I will say, watching the movie, we had this great setup with Tess working for those two shitheads to begin with that were like just taking all of our ideas and like profiting from them. And then she leaves and then goes to this new company. Because I hadn't seen the movie before, I was surprised that it was Sigourney Weaver that she was working for. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how we get connected with Sigourney, and this is how so that was actually, being in 1988, I was actually surprised at that point. But then I think if we made that movie today, we would be less surprised if she ended up working for a woman in that kind of powerful position.
Yeah. And I mean, this movie certainly, if you're going to critique it from today's perspective, like the first thing that jumps out to me is that it's making it very like Tess versus Catherine. There's only room for one. And you know what? Maybe that's a little bit better now, but it's not a ton. Like there's a lot of people still being the first at things that you'd think we might have taken care of a long time ago. There's a lot of times where it's like, well, how diverse do you want it to be? How many women do you want there to be? Like, what's enough? Like those are all vestiges of this time when there were zero, right? There were zero women corporate executives and now there's one. So like, what do you want? But like this movie definitely pits them as like rivals for like the slot, and Tess is pretending that she has her job, like literally, but they're also like Tess is light and Catherine's dark. And, it's like really making them compete.
Well, I wonder if the story here is that, when you hit that certain level of success, it's more about you maintaining your certain level of success and not, it doesn't matter like male, female, you're just going to treat the people below you like crap. So like had Tess been a man, she would have still stole his ideas. I mean, it wouldn't really matter. I think it's more of elevation as to who has what position, as to you're just going to feed off of the people below you and take whatever you can from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And like maybe authentically offer to support, like I'm supportive of you, but I have low expectations of you. I didn't think we were going to have this great idea that would be worth stealing, right? Like she was going to help her be the, the assistant.
The best assistant she could be.
The best assistant possible, but there was like no breaking out of it, like that she didn't even really consider that a viable possibility.
Yeah. And then felt threatened at the point that she saw this great idea, so she would take it. I mean, that whole scene when she jumped in, like when she realized what was going on and all of a sudden they're in the dealing and then she just comes in, I just like steals the entire show and redirects it towards herself and just kind of shoves Tess out of the way because she gives her no excuse as to, and because nobody was going to believe Tess as to this was her idea as opposed to Catherine's idea. Nobody in that situation was going to believe Tess no matter what.
Well, let's talk about that for a second because, as I was thinking about writing this outline, and as we've spoken about before, you watch this movie, when you're watching it for the podcast, you're watching it in a little different way than you normally would. Just like, oh, I'm easy breezy watching Working Girl on a rainy Sunday, whatever. I thought it was interesting that the only way that Tess's idea could work was to get the input of a man, aka Jack. I don't think that her approach certainly I don't think would have worked by herself. And I don't think it would have worked without Jack's involvement.
Agree. Totally.
Yeah.
She needed somebody to legitimize her idea. And Catherine could have done it maybe as well, but Catherine had privilege behind her and had already established herself to legitimize her idea. There's no way Tess, without pretending to be somebody that was already made it, could legitimize her idea. So her and Jack together made it a strong idea. And even actually to your point, Catherine was going to rely on Jack too. So Jack needed to be there.
Right. Even she needed him, perhaps.
Right. In both ways. Which we actually really haven't really talked about, that is the fact that of all the men in New York, Tess is stooping the one guy that Catherine, wants to marry and have babies with. I mean, look, I wouldn't kick Harrison Ford and Working Girl out of bed either, but I found that interesting too. It just, you're right. It's like another way, like, how can we level up this rivalry one more notch, and give them the same guy to fight over? And literally there's millions of men in New York.
So did you guys need the romance? I found it off-putting that like within 3 days now they love each other. Like they can ship each other all they want.
I caught that this time and I was like, what? You met each other like 2 weeks ago. Like,
you black-hearted cynic.
We are now just going to move in together and I'm going to make you toast in the morning. This is just not like we just met and it's a high pressure situation. Like I don't.
Guys, commuting from Staten Island takes a long time.
So she was using him for okay.
Every 20 minutes during rush hour and then twice an hour in the off time. You really need Manhattan real estate if you're going to be an executive. So you move right in there, Tess. You save yourself that ferry schedule.
I mean, she was homeless, right? Because she wasn't living with Mick anymore.
So I think what you're really saying though is had Mick had Manhattan status, she would have stayed with him too.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, Manhattan boats also can be done.
Maybe he's pulling a Pete Davidson and he's going to buy the Staten Island ferry with his boatload. Who knows?
I wonder. You're probably right. I don't. He could have been an ally without being a romantic partner. Like that's true. Like Jack could have been just someone who, again, like Trask is kind of like, I'm not going to be. I'm here to help the deal, like I'm here to support your outside the box thinking. But I wonder if for like, if this movie was supposed to be like, it's a busy business executive plus women, like, well, then women equals romance, like women equals, we have to like do something more than just corporate women. It's got to be women plus handsome boyfriend rushed living together. Poor Mick and his boat.
Well, he's got Doreen, right? She caught the bouquet.
That's true. He's right. Doreen. Do we know what Doreen does? I don't think we got any.
She handles the line. She's handling the lines for me. Okay. She answers the phone. She does a great job. I always thought that was interesting too, and especially watching it now is like, okay, everybody's sort of fitting into their slot. Like Mick is finding somebody who, doesn't have Manhattan aspirations, and that's not a dig. That's just, he wants to, he's going to stay on Staten Island. He's going to marry a Staten Island woman, and it was never going to be Tess. As much as they probably try to delude themselves. One more thing about the women, and I'm going to say this: like every single coat that Melanie Griffith wore of Sigourney Weaver's, I wanted to buy. Like even now in 2023, like that blue houndstooth, I was like, give me that coat. I am going to say also something controversial. I really want a fur. I'm not going to buy one, but like, I really want a fur. Sorry to PETA if you're listening. And I really feel like this movie also popularized the like shoe switch out where you wear the comfortable shoes, the sneakers to work. I had at one point I had like 5 pairs of shoes in my cube at work.
It's funny that you say that because what I don't believe that it popularized it. I believe that it
elevated
it. Like that is an authentic, like commute in shoes,
yep.
Your heels in your desk. That is what the Staten Island ferry at that time looked like. Like it down to the Reeboks and the scrunchy socks off over your black hose.
Oh, yep.
Black pantyhose. Or suntan or nude or, whatever legs pantyhose you produce.
The legs egg sure had several of those.
That to me, that was like a note of authenticity that was pitch perfect when I saw it the first time. Like that's what a lot of people, that's how you commuted, right? Because you had to like you were like literally on a boat in the middle of the trip to work.
Well, and I think anybody who doesn't drive to work, I mean, I did that, when I was going to the office pre-pandemic, I was wearing, either sneakers or especially like after my own foot surgeries, like sneakers or whatever to the office and then switching out my shoes. And sometimes, I would realize it would be noon and I hadn't switched out my shoes yet, just because of whatever. But yeah, I mean, at one point I remember like, I didn't bring the right shoes with me no matter. I had 4 other pairs in my drawer that like I could pull out.
The office shoe, right? I have shoes that only live at the office.
Yeah.
Like, they never see the streets.
Yeah, no, it's indoor. It's indoor use only. Indoor office use only. Now, this is how I will. This is how I look. If I'm seeing clients, maybe if I have a Zoom meeting, maybe I'll do my hair, but we'll see. These days. All right. Well, we would not make good use of Kristen's time if we didn't have the NYC corner with Kristen. Kristen, you had texted me, what are some of these accents? Like, how faithful were the accents? How faithfully was Staten Island really represented in this movie?
So I think that there are things that would stand out generally, but like also particularly stand out to me. So one thing is that engagement party is at a venue that probably sees like 6 parties a day, like from like an 80th birthday party to a Holy Communion, like there's every decoration in that party hall where the engagement party is. If you look around, like that's very true. It's like the St. Patrick's Day decorations are up, red, white, and blue bunting. Like that is like a note of like what that kind of like bridge and tunnel, outer borough, like New York, there's like that New York and there's Manhattan, New York, and there's a little bit of overlap, right? Especially in the work day, but that they're sort of like culturally different places. I thought that felt pretty authentic. The accent, Joan Cusack's accent, I don't know, Allie, if your research yielded any discussion of like accent coaches or anything, but
no.
Some of them were a little, not, it's funny because Melanie Griffith really, the point of her was that she was trying to drop hers, right? So she really only has it at the beginning. And one of the things they're talking about in that first ferry scene is that she has emerging markets class that night, right? And Melanie Griffith sounded a little Boston about it, like emerging markets. That's not it. That's not it. That's a different, your R's are doing different things in those. But I do think that experience of being like, I'm from this part of this world and I see the other part, but I can't break into it. That's a New York story, but that's also like a bigger story, right? Like, I think that's what's relatable about this, right? Is like, how do I get out of the secretarial pool and onto the executive side? How do I get out of Staten Island and into Manhattan? How do I get, out of my small town into a big city? Like there's something like that's both a very New York-y story, but I think has like bigger, translations or implications or whatever you want to call it. But I do feel like that this movie is very New York-y, right? And not just because like in Staten Island, it was like mandatory to support Working Girl, You had
to take a pledge. You did the Pledge of Allegiance and then you did the Pledge to Working Girl.
Our story is finally being told. Not every movie set in New York, to me, is New York-y. There are certain things that just feel like you're like in the spaces, and this to me feels like one of those movies.
Well, I feel like it's this type of movie. I remember when I was watching Sex and the City, like it really made me want to move to New York. Like nothing has made me want to move and like be seen and be a scener in New York than Sex and the City. And it's just like, look at all these fun places, going with my girlfriends and like, that whole thing. And like this movie too, like, okay, like I can hustle. I can put my, get in the grindstone and I could raise it up, and now I'm like, I do not want to be an executive because that sounds like a lot of fucking work. So
it's like a lot of work. And as we've learned from Succession, we don't really understand this.
No. I mean, I guess I could go in and just be like, say some terms, talk about bear hugs and like maybe get the job, like pull my own test.
Accents are also interesting to me because I had a very thick accent, up to and including in college. And I didn't consciously drop it, but there are some people who just have that, a New York accent, a Boston accent, a Philly accent. And, when I lived in DC, I worked with someone who had been there for 30 years, but grew up in Boston. And you would have thought he flew out of Logan earlier that morning. Like he was like Professor Murray. Right? And when I'm in Staten Island, when I'm in New York, it comes back. I'm not intentionally like, code switching, but it comes back because that's other people are saying water. But like I'm in Philly, when people have their thick Philly accents, I'm not really pulled towards that, So accents to me are a very interesting thing. But the fact that Tess would be trying to get rid of hers, I don't know that I keyed in before that when she's listening to Catherine's tapes, it's not just to get like the details of Catherine's life. It's also to hear her elocution, you know, like, dear Wesleyan sisters.
Yes.
Like,
it has been last year.
4 years since our last gathering. Like, I was like, oh, like this is her Henry Huggins training, right? Like this is her. And that idea that you have to like sound a certain way to be taken seriously, I get that too, you know?
Are you guys ready for some fun facts?
Always.
Yes.
Okay, so I really had to trim the fun facts. I mean, there were, I put 5 in here. I could have put 20. I was endlessly fascinated by the fun facts. These are really long, so I'm gonna get a gist. But you know, and Eric had commented on this that Melanie Griffith is billed third, even though obviously she has the most scenes. But she was really sort of still kind of unknown, and she wasn't. They didn't know what her box office performance was going to be, and they really 20th Century Fox wanted a big name, and we're going to get into who was up for those roles of Melanie Griffith, but Mike Nichols really pushed for her to be in, which is why she's billed third behind Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver, who were bigger box office draws. Sigourney Weaver and Melanie Griffith followed several female executives and secretaries on their hectic daily schedules in New York City and sat in during meetings to get a better idea of the industry from the female perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. All right, and we alluded to this earlier, but and I didn't know this actually, that Melanie Griffith was like full on addicted to drugs and alcohol in this movie, and apparently one night she was partying up with Alec Baldwin in Manhattan, all of the tracks, and they were late for the shooting schedule, and they were still drunk or high or whatever, and Mike Nichols and the producer, they were like, "Fuck this." They fined her $80,000 for the lost production time, and they had a nurse stay on hand to test Melanie Griffith's sobriety for the remainder of the shoot. And 3 weeks later, Griffith went to Hazelden, which is, you know, a fancy rehab place in Minnesota.
Which $80,000 in 1988 is a hell of a lot more money than it is today.
Yeah,
I mean, and she was up and coming, so like it's probably she probably did not have a huge bank account.
I mean, they probably took it out of her pay or residuals or whatever. Yeah.
I don't call it Tippi Hedren.
Oh, that's true.
That is true. She did come from money. In fact, actually, I did read that one fun fact. I didn't make it into the list, but I'm going to tell you now. The hairstyle where she like pulled it up in the back with the clips, that was an homage to the Birds.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. So okay. These are the two. Okay, so I'm going to read you some people who were in the running for Tess, and you're going to tell me better, worse, whatever. Okay, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Better.
Meryl Streep. Funnily enough, I don't think so. And Brooke Shields.
No.
Diane Lane.
Maybe.
Yeah. Sarah Jessica Parker.
Huh.
And apparently Lorraine Bracco wrote in her memoir that she gave a first-rate audition as Tess and was devastated that she was not picked.
I am also devastated. Of those, Lorraine Bracco, I can see
Sopranos.
that. That feels the easiest.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Melfi.
Yeah.
Okay.
That feels the most
authentic.
To me. Yeah.
So the only reason I think Michelle Pfeiffer could have done the role is, I mean, typically Michelle Pfeiffer is generally very beautiful on screen, but she can kind of tone it down. But I think of Witches of Eastwick, where she did Sookie, which is a very toned down character. She's not the powerful one really until she comes into her own. And I think that actually would have been a similar performance to Tess here, where it's kind of a toned down character. She's kind of subdued.
Maybe. All right. Here are the people that we're going to also consider to play Catherine. Kathleen Turner, Cher, Gina Davis, Deborah Winger, and especially Shelley Long.
I could see maybe all of them except Cher, but that might be because I have Moonstruck Cher in my head, and
same.
That's very Tess, right? That's very like Outer Borough.
I don't think Shelley Long would have been a good Catherine. I love Shelley Long, but
she would have been too over the top.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Deborah Winger, I think, would have been good. And I actually do get Gina Davis and Sigourney Weaver. Like, I feel like they have had a similar career trajectory.
Yeah. Very powerful on screen. Actually, Kathleen Turner, too. Although I think she would have turned up the bitch a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she definitely. Yeah. Woo. All right. Last fun fact is when Catherine Parker comes back to New York and gets out of the helicopter, she carries a huge stuffed toy gorilla. Sigourney Weaver played Diane Fossey in The Gorillas in the Mist just a few months earlier. And apparently Eric also said that was an homage to King Kong, that the director did that on purpose in the white suit and the gorilla. Okay. Are we ready for a game? Okay. The name of the game, the players have changed. The game remains the same. To quote Harrison Ford, the game is prequel, sequel. We haven't done this in a bit. So are you choosing a prequel? Are you choosing a sequel? What is the storyline, principal actors, directors, whatever you want to put, and what is the medium? Well, you know what? I'm going to let the guest go first. So please, Kristen.
I was very tempted by a prequel because I did think that one of the things that was missing was like a little more Tess backstory. And I thought that in a lot of the Staten Island things, you could have had like it would have, like her parents would have been at Sin's wedding, you know, like there could have been a little more of like, how did Tess get the way that she was? But I did not do that because
wow, that really threw me for a loop. I was ready to hear that story.
I did not do that. I made a sequel with not creative casting, but you know, it just sort of came to me that the sequel should be called Bod for Sin. But the sin in Bod for Sin is not sin as Melanie Griffith referred to it. It's sin like Cynthia, like CYN. So it's called Bod for Sin. And in the sequel, the storyline is this. Sin has been inspired by Tess's success, but isn't really interested in the financial market. So she opens a chain of Curves style gym in the 90s called Bod for Sin. And what's happening now is that it's set in the present day where she is a mogul in the fitness world, and Melanie Griffith and Harrison Ford are still crushing the business world. And the real question of the series, it's going to be like an 8-10 episode streaming series. The real question is like, when do you give it up? Like, when has it been long enough? And so Tess and Jack are crushing it in the business world. Bod for Sin is challenged by like a CrossFit style upstart.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought a lot about this, but I put Jessica Williams is the owner of the upstart CrossFit.
Oh, that's good.
Next generation of fitness gurus. And so that's their conflict. And then the question that gets resolved over the course of the series is like, when are you successful enough? And like, when should you hand it off to the next generation? And I have to do a director, right?
You don't have to, but you know.
That's my biggest challenge. And also I take the game very seriously. So I really do think that Bod for Sin it was a moment of inspiration around it was built. So I looked at who had directed episodes of Glow because it felt like the tone of this could be like that. And Melanie Mayron, who is like 30 something, like of sort of the working girl, like aftermath era, you know, or contemporary rather, not aftermath. She's going to be my director because she directed episodes of Glow, and that feels like she would be good for Bod for Sin.
Bod for Sin. I love it. I love it. And as a proud Curves member.
Right? I mean, Sin, you could see she's inspiring the ladies with their little weights.
I mean, can you imagine her in a leotard? I'm in it. I'm in it already. Done.
Leg warmers for days.
Oh my God. Done. All right, Matt, what do you got for us?
Man, I hate to go second because that's such a good idea. Oh my gosh. This is going to sound silly. So I did a sequel too. I am going to bring Melanie Griffith back. I'm going to bring Sigourney Weaver back because the rivalry has never died. Like, they have gone at it this entire time, like business deal after business deal. Melanie Griffith, her character, so Tess and Jack separated. They realized that, you know, their relationship was not meant to last. They were just good business partners, really, and they kind of they understood that, and that was fine.
I'm eviscerating this relationship. It's bullshit.
I shall break you up in the first place.
So Jack is not going to appear in this movie. Melanie, so she has actually decided. Tess has actually decided she's retiring. She's just kind of had it. She's made her money. She's going to go enjoy her life now. She can afford to do so. One of her mentors, though, or mentees, comes to her because a business that she had been starting is now being targeted by Catherine. And so she needs help preventing the takeover of her new company by Catherine. So that is what brings Tess back in to try and outwit Catherine. So that's what the whole working girl story is going to be for me. So this is, I'm going to have Quinta Brunson from Abbott Elementary.
Oh, nice.
Love her. She's just a delight on screen. So we bring back Melanie Griffith and we have Sigourney Weaver. So it's going to be female cast. We're going to worry about men. There's not going to have to be romance in this. This is all about business and just women getting down to business.
Women doing business.
Business words.
Now, have you thought about the nature of the financial transaction in question? Will it be a leveraged buyout?
I am not qualified to come up with this.
Very important to me that the business makes sense from a market's perspective.
I've heard the term bear hug now, so I'm assuming that's going to be involved.
Be a bear hug, thank you.
Double bear hugs. We'll do double bear hugs.
And I was going to have it directed by Catherine Bigelow. So I think she does drama really well. And I feel like this is going to be more drama. I'm thinking like a 3-part series, nothing super long, but like 3 1-hour shows, just enough to kind of wet your whistle. And then, maybe they can turn it into a series with Quinta Brunson afterwards,
She does have a magic touch for sure.
She does.
Okay. I love it. I also did a sequel, but very different from y'all's. So my sequel is going to be Melanie Griffith and Harrison Ford's daughter, played by Melanie Griffith's real life daughter, Dakota Johnson. She is running the business now. So they've spawned off. They've taken over Trask. So Trask Industries is now run by Dakota Johnson. Oh. It's just like a reverse 50 Shades, but not quite. And as it turns out, so Dakota Johnson is now the mogul. And one of her male mentees, played by Ryan Reynolds, who's kind of like a bumbling idiot, comes in and, he's trying to move up the ladder. It's kind of like a reverse working girl. But, to that end, they hate each other. They fight. She's trying to help him. He's like he just can't get it right, but they fall madly in love.
Sorry, Matt.
And
if it's meant to be a romance from the beginning, that's fine.
They fall madly in love, and eventually he's going to be, Dakota Johnson's still going to be, in charge, and Ryan Reynolds is going to be a stay-at-home dad because he's not meant for the business world. So it's going to be kind of bloopery, kind of funny, definitely much more of a comedy. But I kind of like that symbiosis. Directed by Taika Waititi. So I want to make it a little bit wackier. And, he's got that kind of weird irreverence that I love. And this is going to be a movie, like a straight up movie, maybe like a summer tent pole, something like that, May, June type of movie. So. And maybe it's Working Girl, still working. I don't know. We'll workshop the name, but something like that.
Can I just say that Reverse Working Girl sounds like something in the revised version of the Kama Sutra?
Yes. Maybe they name a sexual position. Maybe that's the side plot. Maybe Dakota Johnson's assistant is like, going through the Kama Sutra at the same time. Who knows? Who knows? All right. Well, I think I would buy all of those movies. All right, so it is time for skip, rent, or buy. Skip means I wish I'd never seen it, fuck Working Girl. Rent means I'm glad I saw it. I don't need to see it again. I'm at an Alec Baldwin level of this movie. And buy means I will certainly watch this again. I love this movie and all that it stands for. So reverse order, Matt. Are you skip, rent, or buy?
Skip with the Rent Rising?
Really?
I mean, it wasn't a bad movie. It's not. I'll elevate it to a Rent. You watch it once. I mean, there were some decent performances. I don't love the whole romance part. The fact that he actually had sex with her when he's in a long-term relationship with Catherine and hadn't broken off yet is kind of creepy to me. That's kind of telling where that relationship might go in the future anyway.
Yikes.
So, but otherwise than that, Jack was a stand-up guy. So I'll say I'll give it a Rent. I'll give it a Rent.
Okay. All right. Kristen.
I think that was a fair. Okay, I respect the evolution of your choice there, Mom. Like how you were resistant at the beginning. I'm a buy. Maybe you should have me on a podcast where I haven't seen a movie before, so you get a more authentic reaction from me. But I'm a buy because I just think this puts me in a place and time in, like it's so late 80s. Like it is fun to be transported there whenever it comes my way, like for 15 minutes or for the whole thing. So I'm a buy.
I mean, no shock. I am also a buy. I did actually buy this movie. I love it so much. I don't know. The performances are great. I don't know. I love everything about this movie. And I mean, I picked it, so I would hope that I would like it. But yeah, I never want to not watch this movie, and I will watch it quite often, probably now that I own it. So, 2 buys and a rent. Not too bad for ye old working girl. In 2 weeks, we are going to be talking about a movie that I have never seen before, and I'm very excited for, Scarface. So I feel like I'm in for a wild ride, and I've been told by some people that it's brilliant and some people that it's really just Al Pacino mugging while pretending to be high in front of a camera. So either way, I'm in. I mean,
it can be both.
Porque los no dos. Like, why can't it be both? So, Kristen, thank you so much as always for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you on your sick bed coming through and giving the commentary.
Thank you so much. I feel so cared for. I'm really glad that it didn't interfere with my ability to appear here today.
With my ability to do good hair. In the words of...
That is a different accent.
My ability to do good hair. The Steel Magnolias train, unfortunately, I believe, has passed for the Rewind Project. But perhaps on a one-off. This has been the Rewind Project. I'm Allie.
I'm Matt.
Be kind, rewind.
You've been listening to the Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
Steel Magnolias in Staten Island. Now that's a movie I would watch.
You know what? Save that for one of these games.